And so now we're ending our 10th book of the Bible. Sorry, yesterday I said 11th, I meant 10th. Um, but it might as well be 11th because we're going to be, we're doing the Psalms already as well. So, anyway, let's just jump right into it. So, with David, we ended up, if you pick up from where we stopped in 1 Samuel 27, David had joined Achish, obviously because of Saul, he had moved into enemy territory. And with David as part of his army, Achish expected him to go with him to fight. Now you know that they were preparing for battle, fighting against Israel. So he expected that he would join his army along with the rest of the Philistines to fight Saul and his armies. And when he informed David of his expectation, he acquiesced. But I doubt if David would have really gone ahead to fight his own people. I mean, David, anointed king. But I feel like that was part of God's plan. Then he was sent back because the other Philistines said they didn't trust him. I actually believe that David would have gone there and done exactly what they thought that he was going to do. So it was, just as well. Saul's desperation made him go against his own edict, which he gave in obedience to God, and went out and sought a medium because they said, get rid of all the mediums and all the psychics and all those people, and he didn't just say drive them out, he said kill them. That was God's command, but Saul drove them out, which is why he was able to find this lady who they sometimes call the witch of Endor. And it's clear by now that he had lost the plot as far as I was concerned, because using sorcery and evil to conjure the spirit of a dead prophet is bizarre sounding. Like, it's really, really bizarre. But the fact that Samuel's spirit arose and gave him devastating news was very interesting to me. I feel like his spirit didn't arise because the witch lady had the power to conjure him, because remember when Samuel came, she screamed, so perhaps she wasn't even expecting him to show up. So for me, I think that everything just happened according to God's plan. And it showed that there is a spiritual power that exists in those realms, but these sorcerers and mediums all access it illegally, which is why God commanded mediums and all of them to, be removed from the town, from the cities, because God actually commanded against it. Saul wasn't hearing from God, not in his dream, not through the Urim, and there appeared to be no prophet at that time, which is why he was desperately trying to seek the spirit of Saul for counsel. And then we go back to the Philistines, and David in battle, and they had rejected him to say, go back, because inadvertently, his faith in God and his loyalty to his people had mattered to him. And they believed that he wasn't going to betray them. Remember that even though he was living among them, he was still carrying out secret conquests, remember? And he was bringing back the spoils to Achish, who was thinking, oh, this is my guy. But he didn't know that he was actually raiding and still, carrying out God's plan to remove the enemies from the promised land. I still can't read my handwriting, guys. I know this is not a surprise to you. So anyway, I said because Saul's time was up, and also because he had other plans for him with the Amalekites, David was taken out of the battle. And then obviously we know what happened. Saul and his sons, including Jonathan, died in the battle. And the grief of David and his men was so overwhelming that the men wanted to stone. Oh, no. While Saul's battle was going on, David goes back and then finds out that they had been raided and all their children and their wives had been taken away. And the grief of David and his men was so overwhelming that when the men were so overcome. They wanted to stone him. And as a result, David, who had been through so many trials, but trusted God through them, strengthened himself. It says he strengthened himself in the Lord. So for these men, it seemed like the worst thing that could happen. But to David, I'm sure in his mind, it's like, yeah, I've seen God, do some awesome things, which was why he went ahead and inquired of the Lord, that shall I pursue and overtake? And the Lord gave him the permission to go after the Amalekites to recover all. I love David's leadership style. For me, he really exemplified leadership through service, encouragement, and inspiration. I feel like he inspired, because look at all the things that we're going through. He was the one who led them, even though they were trying to stone him. And even after they had gotten the spoils from the war and they were returning, the men. Remember, there were 200 who were too tired to move forward. The ones who went were like, oh, don't give those guys because they didn't come. And David was like, no, and he shared it not only with the 200 who were too weary to fight, but he also made sure the spoils were shared not only with them, but also to his friends and the elders of Judah. And he made it an ordinance for Israel going forward. How inspirational is that? It reminds me of, remember how in earlier verses, we saw God bring things into, like, when they were still trying to figure out how to live in this, like, as a civil society, and some things will come up and God will agree to it and then enforce it into law and say, from here onward, this is what happens. That's what it reminded me of here. So obviously we know that Saul and his sons came to a tragic end at the hand of the Philistines, and David wrote Psalm 18 in gratitude for his deliverance from Saul and his other enemies. But that's me jumping ahead. Just to say about the tragic end, David was very touched, and it really affected him. But now in Psalm 18, he began by declaring his love for God, exalting God as his strength, his rock, his fortress, deliverer, shield, horn of his salvation, and stronghold. That's a lot of things, a lot of strong things. But that just goes to show you how much he valued God and God's presence and his deliverance upon him. God is a shield of protection for all who take refuge in him, and this psalm is a testament of God's goodness through his trials. Now here's my hashtag lesson to know God moment. Our righteousness is a gift from God. It's not just something so arbitrary. David describes it in verse 32 as, it is God who gives me strength and makes my way blameless. God is the source of all good things. We saw David strengthened. We saw how he strengthened himself in the Lord, and that's a great lesson for us, especially when we're going through difficult situations. God is the source of our strength and the strength of our lives, and all we have is because of him. So let's take a leaf from the book of David in the times when we're going through hard times or troubles. Let us strengthen ourselves in the Lord, because he's constant. Thank you for joining me today. Tomorrow we'll continue on with Psalms, and we'll be reading Psalm 121, 123 to 125, and 128 to 130. Now these are part of the songs of ascent, and we'll be looking into them tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to seeing you here. Have a wonderful evening. Bye.